because we know that you know this very well. You had a primer on this. Let me start with this. The Filipino fishermen, this was brought to fore. It was a GMA report, sir, that they were, government doesn't want to call it harassed. The fishermen do not want to call it harassed, but the Chinese Coast Guard were taking their fish from them. Was this a surprise to you, or is this something that you've heard so many times in the past?
Well, we've heard that before. That has been happening for some time now. That they were being, well, if you don't want to call them, to call that harassment, that their fish catch were being taken by the Chinese Coast Guard people.
How would you describe it, though?
For me, it's harassment, and it's even theft, because they're taking it against the will of the Filipino fishermen. Mm-hmm. We should protest at the very least.
What happened? So, sir, if China, the ambassador of China, says that we will discipline our men once found if any wrongdoing, would that suffice? Would that be enough?
Well, the tribunal said in its ruling that Scarborough Shoal is a common fishing ground of Filipino, Chinese, and Vietnamese fishermen. So we have a right to fish. The Chinese have a right to fish, the Vietnamese. So the one thing that's lacking is that there's no common agreement among these three nations. They should sit down and discuss the rules of fishing within that shoal, because we have to preserve the fish stock so that there will be sustainable fishing. But the Chinese don't want to discuss that with us. But they're saying out of their goodwill, out of the goodness of their heart, they're allowing us to fish there. But that's not what the ruling says. We have a right. That's our traditional fishing ground since time immemorial.
So I want to go back to that, because so many things to talk about that. So I was thinking of so many things while you were talking, Chief Justice, Acting Chief Justice. First is, it was a goodwill gesture. So my question is, why does it have to be a goodwill gesture if, let's put this, let's clear this up, the tribunal said it's not ours, it didn't say it's China's, it didn't say it's Vietnam's, it's saying that the fishermen of China, Filipinos, and Vietnam can fish in Scarborough Shoal.
Yeah, because
so why is it a goodwill gesture?
That's the point of view of China, because China doesn't want to recognize the ruling. The tribunal cannot decide the ownership of Scarborough Shoal because it's a territorial issue. The tribunal can decide only maritime issues, including fishing. So the tribunal said the people from these three countries can fish. But China said, well, in part, partially complying with the ruling, China said, yes, you can fish out of the goodness of our heart, because they don't want to accept the ruling.
Okay, so that's clear to us that they don't care about the ruling, that we are allowing the Filipino people to fish there out of goodwill.
What we should do is, we are fishing because that is our traditional fishing ground since the tribunal already ruled on that. We should also maintain our position, because otherwise China will later on say, oh, you've been fishing there and you've accepted that you're fishing there because we have allowed you out of the goodness of our heart.
Right. So what you're saying is, it should come to a point, sir, that Vietnam, the Philippines, and China should have a common agreement on this.
Yes, how to fish. They will have to decide the quantity of fish that they can take, because of course, they cannot take everything, because we have to have sustainable fishing there.
Right. But if China says it's theirs and they don't want to honor the tribunal ruling, how can we have an agreement with them?
Well, we will use pressure from ASEAN, because Vietnam is also a member of ASEAN, and pressure from the world, because China has to abide by international law, with international law. And I've already said before that we should have, right after the ruling was issued, we should have gone to the General Assembly, sponsor a resolution that China must comply with the ruling. I think we will get a majority of the members of the UN to support that. And we do that every year. And I think we will get more support every year. But
we haven't done that.
We haven't done that because the Duterte administration has decided to borrow money from China.
So that's where I want to go to. Sir, how do you really strike a balance between the disputed waters and money, investment, and economic gains coming from China?
Well, first of all, the EEZ of the Philippines in the West Philippine Sea is a very huge area that's larger than our total land area. So you can just imagine the value of the resources in that area. You have oil, fish, gas, and other mineral resources. 24 billion loans from China is a pittance compared to the value of the resources in the West Philippine Sea. There's no comparison at all. And besides, you cannot put the value to sovereign rights or sovereignty. Because if you lose sovereign rights or sovereignty, you lose it forever. You cannot get it back.
I want to go back to, just very quickly, because we were talking about the fishermen to begin with as a jump-off point of this discussion. I just want to go back to what some of the fishermen said during that press conference together with presidential spokesperson Harry Roque. Let's listen.
Mapilit silang kukuha ng isda kasi hindi naman kami totoo magkaintindihan. Yung ano lang doon, fish. Yun lang. Tapos aakyat na sila sa amin. Titingnan na nila yung mga lagayan namin. Yun, pipiliin nila yung magagandang isda. Wala naman kami magagawa kasi kumbaga sa nakikisama lang muna kami dyan ngayon dahil andyan yung mga barko nilang malalaki.
I think that it's really telling to hear that nakikisama lang kami kasi nandyan yung mga barko nilang malalaki. Matagal na yung barko nilang malalaki na nandun, sir.
Yeah, in other words, they're really afraid if they don't allow the Coast Guard of China to take their fish. They're afraid of what will happen.
And plain and simple, sir, you call that harassment.
Harassment, that's theft for me.
It's harassment and theft. And then let's go now to the statement made by the Chinese ambassador regarding the issue.
We will check and if there is any misconduct conducted by the Chinese Coast Guards, those individuals will be punished and the rules will be there. Even the best regulated families, accidents happen. So we always have bad apples, but if we have bad apples, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to throw them into the South China Sea and feed the fish.
I just want you to react to the statement of the Chinese ambassador. Is that enough?
Well, they have promised to discipline their personnel, and they promise it will not happen again. That's a good start. But we should be careful that their premise is they're doing this out of goodwill. We cannot accept that because we have a legal right to be there. Whether they have goodwill or not is immaterial because the tribunal said that is our common fishing ground.
Yeah, really, that's the track you're taking, Acting Chief Justice, because you're saying that let's not accept that it's a goodwill gesture because we are supposed to be not allowed. We have the right to fish there. It's not the question of being allowed or not.
Yeah, because I'm worried if we accept their narrative that is their goodwill, we'll be giving up our legal right that we have a right to be there, whether they like it or not.
Yeah. So just to clear that up, the ruling on this, we're talking still about, because there are still other areas to talk about, such as the Spratlys, Sandy Cay. This is the ruling on, of course, on July 12, 2016 on Scarborough Shoal. So just to clear this up, the tribunal also considers it imperative to emphasize that the following discussion of fishing rights at Scarborough Shoal is not predicated on any assumption that one party or the other is sovereign over the feature, nor is there any need for such assumption. Ibig sabihin, sir, there's no one country who has the power or the sovereignty to rule over this area.
Well, what the tribunal was saying is that we are not ruling as to who owns the shoal because that's a territorial dispute and we don't have jurisdiction over territorial disputes. But we have jurisdiction over maritime disputes which include fishing rights.
Right. Do you think a common agreement is possible, sir?
Well, with Vietnam, they're, I think, ready to sign a common agreement with us. The only problem is China. So I think we could start with a common agreement with Vietnam and ask China to join later if China doesn't want to join right away.
At least something. Dalawa na
Yes,
po tayo
dalawa na.
doon sa tatlo.
Yes.
So, government should jumpstart this.
Yes, because in that way, the Vietnam and the Philippines are actually reinforcing the ruling by state practice because they're applying the ruling now. We are enforcing the ruling actually partially because we have agreed to implement it.
You know, sir, the fishermen during that press conference were saying, tinanong po sila kung sino ang may control sa Scarborough Shoal. The fisherman said, China. Hindi ba? Yun ang naging sagot ng fisherman during that press conference, sir. I guess that's not new to someone like you. You knew that the big boats were there, that the Chinese
Yeah,
Coast Guard are there.
Yeah, we know that they have physical control because in our pleading and in our statement before the tribunal when we filed the case, we said China seized Scarborough Shoal. We
Use the word seized.
We use the word seized.
Yeah.
So China seized Scarborough Shoal, which is a fact.
Yeah. Which happened in 2012. Am I correct,
2012,
sir?
yes.
Yeah, after this standoff between.
But of course, that's a physical act. We don't accept that as valid and legal.